Welcome once again to Noir Alley. I'm your host, Eddie Muller. This week's film is a lesser-known noir on the resume of one of Hollywood's biggest stars, Burt Lancaster, and it features one of the most provocative titles of any film in the classic era, Kiss the Blood Off My Hands, released by Universal in 1948. You might expect it to be a horror film if it didn't co-star one of the classiest actresses of the day, Joan Fontaine. The story concerns an American GI still in England at the end of World War II, suffering from what would later be called post-traumatic stress disorder. The violence of the war has seeped into his bloodstream, making him a loaded gun waiting to be triggered. Fontaine plays a lonely woman he unexpectedly encounters who tries to save him from the dark side. Although the movie was made in 1948, the source novel was published before the war in 1940. It was a bestseller in the UK, earning its first-time author, Gerald Butler, comparisons with American hard-boiled writers, especially James M. Cain. That's because the book's protagonist, like the men in Postman Always Rings Twice and Double Indemnity, was no hero. The character of Bill Saunders was bitter, brooding, and violent, without the excuse of being made that way by the horrors of war. Eagle Lion Pictures in the UK bought the rights, intending to film it with Robert Donat in the lead. But by 1947, the picture was still in limbo. Meanwhile, Burt Lancaster hit Hollywood like a beefcake bomb. His single New York stage role, A Sound of Hunting, ran for only 23 shows, but in those few weeks he was deluged with movie offers. Neophyte agent Harold Hecht was a small-timer among the suitors, but he cadged Lancaster by promising he'd always be his most important client, and together their ultimate goal would be to produce their own movies. And that is precisely what happened. In between making hits like The Killers and Brute Force for producer Mark Hellinger and Desert Fury and Sorry Wrong Number for Hal Wallace, Lancaster finagled the film rights to Kiss the Blood Off My Hands, which had been published in the United States in 1946. It would become the first film from Hecht and Lancaster's Norma Productions, named for the actor's wife. They'd been married only 6 months, but Norma Marie Anderson was already a smart and savvy comrade. She encouraged her husband to pursue independent projects, saying he should make, quote, one movie for the bank and one for the art. Universal International agreed to give Norma Productions a $1 million budget and use of the studio lot in exchange for Lancaster appearing in its film version of Arthur Miller's All My Sons. Use of the studio was essential since the story required construction of a 20-block section of London, something that would have been impossible during the mandated budget constraints of the war. For his first film as a producer, Lancaster wanted to reunite with director Robert Siodmak, who had directed his breakout hit, The Killers, in 1946. But schedules didn't align, and the job went instead to actor-turned-director Norman Foster. A protege of Orson Welles, Foster had only recently returned to America from Mexico, where he'd spent the past several years making movies, several starring his discovery, Ricardo Montalban. Foster had a Wells-like vision for this film, and he chose Greg Toland, cameraman on Citizen Kane, to work his visual magic. Well, the magic went up in smoke after a week of filming, and Toland was replaced by another Wells collaborator, Russell Meddy, whose images are saturated in the noir vibe so prevalent at the time. Now, virtually every English expat in Hollywood was hired to fill out the cast, and the most crucial player was imported from England to make his first Hollywood film. Robert Newton wrings everything out of the role of Harry Carter, the black marketeer who is the villain of the piece. And if all that hasn't gotten your pump primed, rest assured that, as in virtually all his early films, Lancaster will lose his shirt at one point, and the beefcake will be on full display. From 1948, featuring a typically terrific score by Miklos Rozsa, here is Kiss the Blood Off My Hands. The script of Kiss the Blood Off My Hands was the work of 3 writers, veteran screenwriters Ben Maddow and Leonardo Bercovici, and first-timer Walter Bernstein. Within a few years, all three would be blacklisted in Hollywood, accused of being communist sympathizers. While it kept their names off movie screens for most of the 1950s, it certainly didn't curtail their careers. All of them continued writing by using fronts to sign their scripts. Bernstein would eventually be nominated for an Academy Award for the script of the 1976 film The Front, a fictionalized version of his experiences during the McCarthy era. Gerald Butler, the author of the novel Kiss the Blood Off My Hands, had another of his books, Mad with Much Heart, made into the notable noir On Dangerous Ground, which shifted the novel's setting from England to upstate New York. This was director Norman Foster's second Hollywood film following his return from Mexico. He'd relocated there after helping develop one of the segments of Orson Welles' aborted project, It's All True. Foster was a good director who never got his due, largely because he couldn't escape, at least in the minds of film historians, Welles' massive shadow. He never really got credit for directing 1943's Journey into Fear, despite Welles' insistence that Foster directed all but a few scenes. After making this film, Foster bounced around as a freelancer at various studios, which kept him from building a sturdy resume. These days, he's probably most known for the 1950 film Woman on the Run, which was rescued several years back by my Film Noir Foundation. Foster also returned to his roots as an actor in Welles' final film project, The Other Side of the Wind, portraying the loyal aide-de-camp to the megalomaniacal film director played by John Huston, a thinly veiled depiction of Foster's own relationship with Welles. Producer Harold Hecht made a big deal in the press that this film would feature an all-British cast surrounding his new all-American star, Burt Lancaster. Fortuitously, Joan Fontaine had been born to British parents, making her casting both logical and authentic. It didn't hurt that the actress, under contract at Universal at the time, was an Oscar winner and a 3-time nominee, appearing in support of Hollywood's hottest new male star. Fontaine was often bemused during production by her co-star's domineering behavior and his tendency to contradict Foster's direction. She'd ask Foster, "Shall I do it your way or Mr. Lancaster's way?" It also came as a surprise when Fontaine had the production shut down for 12 days due to illness. Turns out she was pregnant and trying to hide the fact. Despite further complications that required Robert Siodmak to direct a few final bits of business, Lancaster's first film as a producer finished on time and on budget. To show how much he had invested in the picture's success, Lancaster staged a unique promotion in support of the film's release. He and actor stuntman Nick Cravat, his boyhood chum, recreated the acrobatic routine that first brought them to public attention. It was a 20-minute vaudeville-style opener in 3 major cities, accompanied by full orchestra. Can you imagine going to see Kiss the Blood Off My Hands in a movie theater and having Burt Lancaster doing stunts live on stage to start the show? Man, that was show business. You're welcome to register your delight or disgust with today's film on the Noir Alley Facebook page or Twitter feed. But just be sure to make it aboard the bus in time for next week's show, when we take a Greyhound through the American Southwest, riding with Ruth Roman as she gets mixed up with a guy who might be a murderer in the 1951 melodrama Lightning Strikes Twice. Until then, see you in the shadows.